Spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. Just to get out of the way. Okay, I like to start off by saying, no, I'm not really questioning this story, or I'm not trying to critique this story. Well, I'm critiquing it a little bit, but I'm not going to really critique the story and Gege's vision, like saying, no, Gojo should have won this fight for this reason, this reason, and this reason. Well, I'm kind of doing that too. But I'm not saying the story is wrong and letting Sukuna win. Sukuna was the main final villain. Of course he was going to win the fight. What I'm doing here is disproving some misconceptions about statements made in the fight. And I'm also discussing what if Gojo fought Sukuna without the 10 shadows. Because there have been some statements, or I've seen some people say that Sukuna still wins 10 times out of 10. Or Sukuna is mopping Gojo because he didn't even use this or this or this. Well, I'm going to get into all of that today. But first, cue the intro. I lied, I don't have an intro. My assistant's working on it. But alright, to start off, the first misconception I'm going to clear up is
Sukuna survived a surprise attack boosted purple, so Gojo really didn't have any way to beat Sukuna.
I know it's not directly stated, but the feeling of the fight, if you just reread the fight and judge the feeling, the tone of the fight, they were just messing around. It was more of a warning shot. He wasn't expected, it didn't kill Sukuna. None of the spectators were surprised it didn't kill Sukuna, so it just gives more credence to it was just a warning shot. And also, right after the warning shot, those two were just playing around. The fight didn't really get serious for either one of them. They started using the main expansion, and you can say that's kind of Mick, and you say nah, he was really trying to kill him. But then you have to take in the fact later on in the fight, Sukuna was scrambling, panicked, nervous about negating the hollow purple, and he later, in his own words, not the narrative or not any other spectators, he himself said the purple fired at the beginning of the fight had more than 120 output. He likely used some sort of biting valve. He looked to be less than 4 kilometers away, or 2 miles, or less than 2 miles away. Yet even taking it head on, all I lost was both of my enhanced arms. However, I am not exactly in the perfect shape right now. If I take purple from this distance, even at 100% output, it will likely prove fatal. And I bring this up for a couple of reasons. Yes, Sukuna was able to survive a 200% hollow purple, but I can theorize, or one can theorize or inference using context clues, that his hollow purple gets weaker the more distance it travels, or the further away it's fired from its user, it gets weaker, which is kind of a big head thinking. It doesn't really, it's never directly stated anywhere besides the context clue of at this distance. I mean, meaning it's stronger at a closer distance. Also, he was hurt, I would throw that in there, but Gojo never uses hollow purple as like an opening move. He always does damage and use it as a finisher. It wouldn't have made any sense for him to just now start using hollow purple as an opening move, which gives more credence to that being a warning shot or just a filling out shot to see how he would react. The next misconception I wanted to clear up is Gojo was trying to kill Sukuna from the very beginning. He didn't start actually trying to kill Sukuna until round 2, or when they both lost their access to the main expansions. Now this one is kind of stated in the series. I'm gonna show it right here, but it said, and mind you, he already had Sukuna in checkmate with the unlimited void hitting Sukuna from far away, but he then proceeds to say, I'm not done yet. Crushing your heart was the bare minimal. I want your lungs and liver too. I'll bring you closer to death than you was at the detention center. Now I'm gonna finish you off. Now I'm gonna end this. I'm gonna bring you closer to death in an attempt to try to bring Megumi out. Then it was later stated at the beginning of round 2, Gojo says, I beat you dead before you even hit 3 spins. Then the sideline speculators then say, he hasn't forgot about Megumi, has he? He might have. Meaning he was thinking about Megumi up until that point where he said that. Meaning he wasn't trying to kill Sukuna until round 2. But that's how I interpreted it, and I feel that's a logical way to interpret it. But if you want to say, nah, he was trying to kill Sukuna from the jump, which isn't really supported by any of his actions in the fight, unless you want to say the 200% hollow purple he fired on him. But I already addressed the fact that he wasn't trying to kill him with that. But you can think what you want. The last misconception I want to bring up today before I really get into like breaking down a fight between Gojo versus a non-10 shadows Sukuna is Sukuna had a world cutting slash, when in fact he didn't. He stated himself he didn't, and I'm still so confused with why so many JJK fans believe he had a world cutting slash already. He was literally begging Maharaga to show him how to do it so he can then copy it. Sukuna is a genius who only needs to see the technique once to master it. He stated, "What I wanted from Maharaga was a model on how to tear through your infinity." Meaning he didn't know how to do it, or he couldn't figure out how to do it without Maharaga. Now let's get into the breakdown between Gojo versus non-10 Shadows Sukuna. I will be referencing some feats from the Gojo and Sukuna fight when he did have the 10 Shadows, because that's the highest level fight each of them had fought in the entirety of the series. And I'll keep it simple by breaking it down into these subcategories being domain, curse technique, speed, durability, and win conditions, to really prove who is the strongest or make my point on who I really think is the strongest. First, let's start off with domain. Now in their fight, it was stated multiple times and it was shown multiple times. Not really stated, I mean it was stated by Gojo, but he was biased, but it was shown multiple times that Gojo's domain was better. He just simply better. Outside of Sukuna's open domain, he really didn't have any defense against Gojo's domain. When he brought it into it, when they really domain clashed, instead of Sukuna attacking his domain from the outside, Gojo won both times. So that really isn't a factor. I mean, you could say Sukuna wasn't really trying. He wasn't really using his domain to his fullest extent because he didn't use the Divine Flame, but it was already stated that his Divine Flame was too slow and had a narrow range, which he was never going to be able to hit Gojo, who was already speed blitzing him. Not speed blitzing, but Sukuna really couldn't keep up with Gojo's speed. As shown when Gojo had literally was blitzing him and Sukuna was seeing actor images and barely able to keep up in hand-to-hand combat. So arrow that has been described as slow with a narrow range would have never been able to hit a Gojo. And you could say he didn't really need to hit Gojo because it would activate the entire area. Well, Gojo, he was able to show the ability to tank Sukuna's domain suspension already, even without the Cherry Blossom or the simple domain. He was able to take some of the attacks, and he could say the Divine Flame and that combustion ability was way above cleaving dismantle he was using against Gojo. Well, I wouldn't put that combustion ability above Hollow Purple. I would put it on similar tier levels, and I wouldn't say Sukuna is that much more durable than a Gojo. So Gojo not just outright taking it, but using a Cherry Blossom or a simple domain against the flame explosion, he could come out similar to how Sukuna came out against his Hollow Purple when he took it point blank towards the end of that fight, or at the end of that fight. And even still, and he might not even be able to use that ability, being the fact that every time Sukuna used his domains, Gojo followed right soon after. So unless he was going to use Fugue at the very start of the fight, when Gojo was still figuring out how to counter Sukuna's domain, which could happen, but it's not that likely. And before diving into the topic again further, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that Gojo himself stated that Sukuna wasn't going all out, or I couldn't get him to use his full power, which I really think is just a misstep from Gege, because throughout the rest of the fight and throughout the rest of the series, when Sukuna is literally fighting for his life up until he lost, he didn't show any more feat or abilities that I believe that would have been able to defeat Gojo. Now you could take that statement for face value, like Gojo himself said it, but I just think that Gege misspoke, or I don't know. I don't think that statement was entirely accurate based on what Sukuna did after his fight with Gojo. I know his brain was damaged from the Gojo fight, but still I don't believe he showed any significant feats or abilities that I would feel confident saying that that would have been a world swinging factor in the Gojo fight. Outside of the world slash, we already know he didn't have. So if he fought him without the 10 shadows, he wouldn't have access to that ability. But that's just my take on this statement. You can just take the words face value and just now also I can bring up his tools. Like you can say Sukuna didn't have his electric trident, but I don't think that would have made any factor in the fight, due to the fact that Kishimo's curse technique was able to negate the tool's ability. And if Kishimo's technique can do it, that gives me no reason to believe that Gojo's technique couldn't, or that it can bypass Gojo's technique and when it couldn't even bypass Kishimo's technique. Then moving on to the win conditions for these fights, I know I just brought up all the information, but Gojo's win conditions pretty much stay the same versus a non-10 Shadow Sukuna being used as Infinite Void, which he was able to hit Sukuna with, and Sukuna was only able to survive that encounter with his Infinite Void thanks to the intervention of Maharaga. And he had him in checkmate, like I saw the pen order, I'm gonna show it right here, but he had him in checkmate. It was nothing Sukuna could have done. He's already been hit with Infinite Void, and once you're hit with Infinite Void, you're pretty much stun locked until your brain is overloaded and you die. The only reason Sukuna didn't die was because Maharaga broke the domain and he pushed some of the domain effects onto Megami Soul. If Sukuna's in his original body and doesn't have Megami Soul or the Maharaga to stop that, the fight pretty much ends once Sukuna is hit with the Infinite Void for a prolonged amount of time. I mean, hell, he was only hit for 10 seconds and his brain was damaged up until the point where he landed a couple black flashes to revitalize his cursed energy. Also, another one condition for Gojo, weaken Sukuna, which he's been shown capable of doing, being the fact that he's better in hand-to-hand combat. He was able to outmaneuver Sukuna versus a Maharaga versus a Algito, so he was fighting 3-on-1. So Sukuna just having full arms probably wouldn't have made too much of a difference, especially since he'd been able to take full advantage of his blue and red techniques without worrying about them being adapted to. And the win conditions for Sukuna, you can say his fire combustion, time to Gojo into burnout, his curse technique, then using his domain expansion on Gojo. That's really the only way. Outside of that, he didn't have any feats. Besides, he did have his domain amplification to break through Limitless, but that alone wasn't going to be enough to be able to beat Gojo, who would have had full control over his abilities. And if you want to take Gojo's after death statement as the word of the law, which I really don't, Gojo pretty much wins against a non-10 Shadows Sukuna, I'd say 6 out of 7 times out of 10. It's not too much. I ain't gonna say he's the old woman favorite. He wins every time out of. I can admit that Sukuna has shown the feats to be able to beat Gojo way. The fight goes more Gojo way than Sukuna's more often than not, especially if Sukuna is not getting the final villain boost that gave to him. But other than that, hope you guys like this little analytical video. My third time doing a video like this. Leave a comment on how you think this fight would have gone if he didn't have the 10 shadows, or if I got something wrong, please feel free to correct me in the comment section. But other than that, have a blessed one.